tied to them and do nothing but their bidding. So the McKinley issue between Roosevelt, McKinley, and Taft, you see the destruction of the protective tariff that McKinley gave to us, which caused our country to flow with gold. Because our domestic manufacturers were really producing. We had a protective tariff, and we needed no income tax. So what did the wicked sinners do? They wanted to reduce the tariff, the protective tariff, and then to make up for lost revenue, why, we will tax the people with a heavy progressive income tax.
Which is a plank of the Communist Manifesto and never in the original Constitution.
Absolutely.
How do you explain that?
That's right. So that's what they did. And so we see that the high-level cartel capitalists are communists. They finance communism. Mm-hmm. They implement the precepts of the Communist Manifesto. So now all 10 planks are in full force in effect in this country today.
This is the Grass You Know. We're going up on part 3, the segment 60 minutes to 90 minutes with Eric John Phelps, author of Vatican Assassins. And also his website is VaticanAssassins.org. Again, Eric, before we go into this third and last part, impart whatever information you wish about the book and the website.
Okay. You may reach me at that website, VaticanAssassins.org, or contact me at Eric, E-R-I-C, at VaticanAssassins.org. I'm always open for new information, and I really value important emails that can help me further paint this picture. The other thing is the VA3, which is the third edition of Vatican Assassins, should be out in 60 days. It will be nearly 1,100 pages with over 300 pictures and quite a good few captions. So if you don't really want to read the book, if you feel it's too laborious, you can just read the book through the pictures. And so that's kind of what's in the making now.
Also, you invite people to join a very expansive email group, do you not?
Yes, if you'd like to join my email group, just send me an email. I'll be happy to put you on. I only take people off the email group if they request it, and I don't take people off if they have contrary ideas, because I find that that's good for me and it sharpens me. So I welcome you to the email group and to bring to it what you would like to.
This is part 3, and thank you, Eric, for being with us for another half hour. But this is fascinating stuff, and I hope you're energized as much as we are in listening to it. We talked about the Communist Manifesto and how it has been realized in the United States. I do an article weekly for a local newspaper whose PDFs I do put up on my website, visigot.com. But, you know, I'm going to put up one about the Communist Manifesto and show people how it's been realized here, especially with the situation about the eminent domain for the purpose of corporations. Mm-hmm. And I mean, one of the planks of the manifesto is the abolition of private property, which we know that that's wanted because the monarchies in the Vatican hated the fact that, you know, slobs like you and I might actually be able to own property, which you could not do in feudal Europe.
That's right. That's right. Holding property was a mere privilege granted from the king, and you paid a tax to hold that. And if you didn't pay it, they moved you off the land. And that was one of the beautiful things of our system here, that when these Bible-believing men, for the most part, were Protestants, all Protestants except Charles Carroll, who signed the Declaration of Independence. He signed it in spite of being a member of the Catholic Church. They secured for us the right to hold property in a lodial freehood in fee simple absolute. That means we were beholden to no lord, and our land was ours to do with it what we wished to do.
And we're seeing somewhat of an abrogation of that right now. There's everybody in the world is just trying to come down and do what they can to get in between landowners and their property and future landowners for the possibility of purchase. And, of course, in Florida, we've seen such egregious increases in the real estate, which has been fueled very much by speculators from the outside. But be that as it may, and, of course, a lot of, anti-socialists would say, well, let the market bear what it will. But it's a stilted market. It's not really free.
That's right. It's not a free market. Again, we go back to the currency problem. We have no private wealth. We are all broke. I was at the Birmingham Civil Rights Museum this last week. Spent a whole day there. And it showed certain blacks in a bank in Birmingham. They were in suits. That was their bank. And I said to my son there, I said, Ben, I said, those blacks in that picture were freer than, even though they were not voting and accorded the certain equalities that whites had, they were freer then than you and I are now. I said they had gold and silver coin, maybe not many of them, but they had gold and silver coins in their pockets. They had a currency they could use that was redeemable in gold and silver coin. They could carry a gun without a permit. They had rights that I would love to have right now, back then.
Mm-hmm.
So what they've done is they have given us this wicked, false fiat currency, and whenever you use a Federal Reserve note to purchase land, it's just like using monopoly money. It's the money of a private corporation. Right. According to the law, a third-party interest is created in that transaction, and the Federal Reserve Bank has an interest in every piece of real property in this country because every piece of real property has been purchased with Federal Reserve notes.
I have to tell you, I'm sitting on a considerable amount of fiat currency, but I would like to transfer it into the purchase of land because of it's a tangible. And if I don't do that soon, I don't think that that'll be worth very much.
Right.
Going back to the presidential assassinations, and we skipped ahead a little bit, but going back to James Buchanan, what was the deal with him? And we all know, and I tell you this, Charles Wilcox in his book, Democracy Under Siege, Eric, did put in some facsimiles of newspapers from New York that talked about Buchanan's inaugurational party being poisoned.
Yeah, I have that too, and also in the Burt McCarty work, or Suppress the Truth.
So what's going on with that?
Okay, well, again, they're suppressing the common knowledge and not teaching that in our history classes. But the papers ran it that, of course, they were poisoned. 50 people were affected. 38 of them died.
Right.
And one of them was the president's nephew, Elliot Eskridge. So Buchanan knew he was poisoned. And so he instructed his doctors to do what they needed to do to get this poison out of his system. And according to his acquaintances, this whole poisoning, he was poisoned at National Hotel, which was really the Jesuit haven of Washington, D.C. at the time. Now it's Waldorf Astoria in New York. But with this poisoning, his contemporaries said he had aged 25 years. Yeah. And that he was, from then on, a tool of the Jesuit order. And that makes perfect sense because it's Buchanan. Even though he rightfully said he had no power to declare war on a sovereign state that was not granted to him in the Constitution, even though he rightfully held that position, he sent down the Star of the West to reinforce Fort Sumter in South Carolina. And as soon as the Star of the West sailed, that was an act of war according to international law, because the southern states had rightfully and properly seceded, which they had the right to do. So he started the war.
But did he really?
Well, he didn't have to reinforce the fort. I mean, he didn't really start it. The Jesuits were using masonry on both sides to start it. They used Beauregard, who was a Freemason on the south, to fire on the fort. They used Buchanan of the north, who was a Freemason, to send down Star of the West.
Right.
You have masonry involved on both sides, fomenting that war, and because the Jesuits are always on both sides, controlling the essential leaders of both sides, they can control the synthesis.
And really, that was a non-event, because no harm was done, but it became an inflammatory issue, and off we went into the Civil War.
Correct. And so it became a war over the right to secede. And when the Emancipation Proclamation came out by Lincoln, that criminal declaration, that turned it into a crusade to free the slaves. And so now that supposedly shifted all the moral right to the North.
To the North, right.
Yeah.
All right, now we won't go into Lincoln and Kennedy at least this juncture because it's been very well covered. So let me go to the more, shall we say, enigmatic or esoteric assassinations, and you've mentioned it, and we'll skip ahead to Garfield, and let me just give you a quote. This in William Still's The Money Masters. This is a quote attributed to Garfield. It said, "Whoever controls the volume of money in any country is absolute master of all industry and commerce. And when you realize that the entire system is very easily controlled, one way or another, by a few powerful men at the top, you will not have to be told how periods of inflation and depression originate." And according to Still, within a few weeks of making this statement, on July 2nd of 1881, President Garfield was assassinated.
Mm-hmm.
Your take on Garfield?
Okay, I think that's a great observation by Mr. Still, and I will keep that in my notes. Now, we have to review Garfield a little bit. First of all, Garfield was a disciple of Christ. And I'll read this to you if you'd like me to, because he is one of the most difficult ones, he and McKinley, is to find why they were killed.
Mm-hmm.
And what I have here, in describing him, he's a condemned heretic. He's a noted preacher for the disciples of Christ, which is very similar to the Baptists. He was a preacher. He was a Federal Major General of Volunteers, 1863. He was well known for his work in the House of Representatives,